One thing that always makes this gospel makes me think of, have you ever seen those like inspirational calendars where it's like, it's a stack of papers and it's like you tear one off each, you know what I'm talking about? Like 360, okay, that's not just me. Well, there's one of them that's like has the daily Bible quote of the day. And it's like, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, John 3:16, whatever you do to the least of these you do to me, Matthew 25. But then there was one and it said, I will give you all things if you worship me. And it's like, ooh, thank you. But then if you read today's gospel, who says that? Satan. So it's like context. Context in the Bible is very important. So even those inspirational calendars, it's like, uh-oh. Okay, but every Lent, the first Sunday of Lent, every single year, it places before our attention this scene, right? This scene of Jesus being tempted in the desert for 40 days of fasting and prayer. And after Jesus goes through this time of prayer and fasting, the devil tests him. Right, the devil tests him. That Greek word there, I'm a nerd, I know, it's peirazo. And a peirazo, it's more than just a temptation. Right? We think about Jesus being tempted or something, but one reason I don't always like the word tempted is because it always has this connotation of like doing bad things. Sure, but like no one has ever said to me, Father, I was really tempted to donate $100,000 to the parish today, but don't you worry, I overcame that temptation. It's like, no one ever says that. So usually when we think about a temptation, it's like, I was tempted to steal a cookie. I was tempted to do this bad thing. Okay. But a peirazo is more than just a temptation to do a bad thing. A peirazo is a test. Right? It's a test. It reveals something. Just like a test in school, it reveals who studied or who's just too smart for their own good and who's dumb and who didn't study. It reveals something about you. Just like in sports, like a game, it reveals which team is better, which athlete has prepared better. It reveals something about a team or about an athlete. A peirazo is a test. It reveals something about who you are. Okay, so when Jesus faces these three temptations, these three peirazo, these three tests, what's going on at a deeper level here is that we're discovering who this Jesus guy really is. It allows us to see how Jesus operates from his true identity. What we see then in the gospel is that in all these tests, these temptations, these peirazo that Jesus faces, the devil's poking at his identity, who he is. Again, just what does the devil say? First thing he says, if you're the Son of God. Is Jesus the Son of God? Yeah, okay. So why are you even asking, man? If you're the Son of God. So yeah, it's kind of a duh. Jesus is the Son of God. But what's deeper? The question is, Jesus, do you actually live that way? Do you believe that? Is that how you operate? Do you operate as the Son of God? And Jesus, predictably, passes these tests pretty easily. Why? Because he's 100% rooted in that identity. He is the Son. That's how he's going to operate. He's the beloved Son of the Father, and so he doesn't succumb to temptation because he's very much rooted in that identity. And it's a very important, very beautiful thing. The question, though, is for us, and we're not so worried about Jesus. The question, though, is for us, when we face those tests, right, when we face those peirazo in life, we typically don't pass with 100%, right? Sometimes we struggle a little bit. But what's going on at a deeper level? Because sure, we commit sins, we do bad things, okay. But what's going on at the deeper level? What's really going on? That's where, again, remember that image I gave you last week of the tree, right? We worry about all the fruit on the tree, all the bad things we do, or my imperfections or my character flaws. Okay, we can work on that. But if we want to work on that, we don't need to pick off more fruit. We need to get to the roots of what's going on. Just as Jesus is rooted in his identity as the Son, completely dependent on the Father, that's what we need to be as well. We need to find ourselves rooted in our identity as beloved sons and beloved daughters of God. So that's what's going on here. Yeah, failing a test or a temptation, it means we commit a sin, fine, but that's just the leaves, that's just the fruit. A peirazo, though, it reveals who we are, or at least who we believe ourselves to be. And so the point is that while Jesus overcomes these peirazo because he's rooted in his identity, we fail the peirazo because we're rooted in something else. We root our identity in something else. Objectively speaking, yes, if you're baptized, except for our heathens here, don't worry, we'll get to you. If you're baptized, you're a child of God. Objectively speaking, you're a son of God. You're a daughter of God. Objectively, you are. But then the question, though, is existentially. Objectively, yeah, but existentially, how do you operate? Do you actually operate and live with this security, this, again, rootedness in my identity? I'm a son of God, and I'm going to live that way because I know the Father will take care of me. The Father will, or do we go, yeah, I'm a son of God, but I'm going to go figure things out myself. And that's the temptation. That's the peirazo. That's what these tests reveal. Is how much am I actually rooted in that? And the question then is why? Why do we not just live out of our identity as sons and daughters of God? We're sons and daughters of God. This should be easy, right? So why isn't it? Why, even though I'm baptized, do I still mess up? Why do I still struggle with sin? Why am I not perfect? Why do I have that character flaw? Whatever that is. And simply put, it's because, as we've been talking, it's because we need a healing at our roots. That's what we need. At the roots of our identity, our identity has been wounded in different ways, and that's in need of healing. It needs God's healing, or else we're going to, orange trees grow oranges, apple trees grow apples. The trees that we're growing are going to continue to produce those fruit we don't like if we don't address the roots. And at the roots is something that has been wounded, something that needs God's salvation, as we say. So, simple way to talk about this, though. What though is this wound thing? What it actually is a wound? Because it's easy for us to think like, Father, I've never broken a bone in my life. I'm fine. But we're talking about like a wound to our heart, something deep down within us. In theological terms, we would say that a wound is when love has been withheld from us, or when we've experienced an unloving action. Love has been withheld, or we've experienced an unloving action. Again, think of love being withheld. Anybody have kids? No, parents have no favorites, right? Exactly, they do. Love is withheld. Again, our parents aren't always malicious about this or something, but it's easy that even when we're growing up, love is withheld because parents have favorites. And as kids, we're very perceptive of this. Sorry, parents. We're very perceptive of this. We know who mom and dad's favorites are. And even though mom and dad aren't trying to punish us, love is easily withheld in a way that we perceive. Or think of parents who are a little bit, manipulative or controlling. Or think of parents who are totally absent, and as a kid, you just kind of had to raise yourself. And so love was withheld from you because you just had to do things yourself. Okay, this is an example of love being withheld. We could talk about these in psychological terms or criminal terms, sure. But in theological terms, according to our faith, this is just love that's withheld from us. Love is also, its unloving actions are also inflicted upon us. And that can be things like having to experience the death of a parent or a sibling or a friend. That can be things like growing up in households that are, mom and dad yell at each other quite often. That can be things like growing up and having to suffer abuse. That can be things like growing up and having, again, just even kids bullying us, anything. Like when unloving actions are then inflicted upon us. Okay, so all these things can produce wounds, this lack of love at our deepest level. And so it works in just a simple way. It's very simple, right? We have just this event, this experience. Something happens. That's how life works. Something has to happen. Something happens where love is withheld or an unloving action is inflicted upon us, and that's what produces that sort of a wound. Okay, and that wound then is like a crack in our heart. I know I'm a nerd. I know this. The Latin word for wound is vulnus, where we get the word vulnerable. So our wounds are those places in our heart where we're vulnerable. There's those places where there's an easy place for the enemy to attack us. Okay, so that's, again, we have something. But then the second thing that happens, though, is where we're attacked, like the devil does in the gospel of the day. If you're the son of God, if you're a daughter of God, he attacks that wounded spot, that place where we're vulnerable. And he accuses us of our identity. He says, you really think you're the daughter of God? You really think you're a son of God? All of a sudden, we start to question whether we are. And we start to take on a new sort of identity. I put that on your sheet this week. Just like there's 7 deadly sins, there's also 7 deadly wounds. And 7 false identities that we can start to live from. But then third, we start to live and act out of that. Because we don't truly consider ourselves. Again, objectively, we're a son and daughter of God. Objectively. But existentially, day to day, we don't actually always believe that. And so we start to live differently. So what does that look like? Again, I shared this last week. That fun example of me almost drowning in a pool. The peirazo that I face on the regular that reveals the false identity that I've begun to believe about myself. I know it shocks you, but Father Michael struggles with that fun sin of pride. Right? I don't trust others. I like to do things myself. I don't like to rely on others. I think other people's ideas are stupid because I'm the smartest. Things like that, normal things. Right? But that's that sin of pride that I struggle with. I asked God in prayer one day, where does that come from? Right? Some people struggle with this, I know, but other people don't. Like, what happened to me? Where did that come from that I started to grow my tree of pride and it produced all these fruits of pride? What's the roots of it? And remember, that's when God gave me that simple memory from when I was 5 years old. A whole 5 years old. And like all 5-year-old idiots, I jumped into the deep end of the pool thinking I could swim. I could not. And so as I start to drown, again, as the Lord showed me this in my memory, as I started to drown and die, I saw my two older brothers, just standing there. Doing jack. Nothing. They were doing nothing. Here I am dying, and they're just like standing. And again, it's not like they were laughing at me. It's not like they pushed me in the pool trying to kill me. No, they just didn't do anything. They just sat there. Again, spoiler, I made it. I'm alive. I made it to the side of the pool eventually. I survived. But I remembered, again, the Lord showed me in my memory when I was asking him, Lord, what's at the roots of this stupid pride that I struggle with? I remember sitting on the side of the pool, catching my breath, and saying to myself, they don't care about me. They just don't care. And in that moment, at 5 years old, I made this simple sort of like a vow, like a promise to myself, I just won't rely on anybody else. I was 5. Okay, but it's that simple thing. Again, an event happens. I almost drowned in a pool. But then that produces what? That produces a false belief about who I am. I believe that I'm all I got. I believe that son of God I may be, actually nobody cares about me. Definitely not the Father. Definitely not my brothers. It's only me that I got. All of a sudden, that becomes the identity I believe about myself. And then so what flows from that? Well, I start to live differently. I'll only take care of myself. I'll do things for myself. Okay, so that's what I mean. Again, someone shared another example that came up for them in prayer last week. It's just like the person had an experience and they prayed, God, what's at the roots of my thing? And they just had an experience of being picked last at recess. Again, it happens to kids every single day. But yet as simple and as innocuous as that sounds, simple events like that in our lives where love is withheld or an unloving action is inflicted upon us. It's things like that are at the roots that wound us, and then it results in what then grows from it from there. So just think how like seemingly dumb those experiences are. Anybody ever almost drowned in a pool? Wasn't just me, I know it. Anybody ever pick last at recess? Again, those are seemingly dumb examples of things that happen. But think of all the even more serious things that happen all the time, that are very common. Parents that obviously prefer your siblings to you, and you always feel like you're trying to perform for them and like earn their love. They withhold love from you. Think about the physical abuse that people have to go through, physical, sexual, emotional abuse that people have gone through in their lives. Think about houses and homes where kids were raised that you grew up in, right? Where mom and dad fought all the time, where they eventually divorced, where there was that struggle that ensued. Think about a home where there was no all these examples that are so common and much more serious than some 5-year-old kid that, splashed around in a pool for 30 seconds trying to save his life. Think about years and years of something like that going on and what that does to us. The wound that inflicts at us at a deep, deep level. Okay, the point then is this. Those are the places where we desperately need God's healing. We worry about the sins that we start committing. Sure, they're bad things we do. But the Lord can't heal sins. Like the Lord can't heal you. The Lord can't heal stealing cookies or whatever the sin is. He can forgive it, sure. But what he heals are those places within our hearts that are wounded. Right? So go back to Jesus. Why doesn't Jesus have any problems with sin? Why does he overcome these temptations and tests so easily? It's because his roots, the place that he's rooted, is in his identity as the Son, rooted in the love of the Father. When he's tempted and tested, he easily moves past those sorts of things. But in that's where we see the solution. Okay, and we'll talk about this more in the coming weeks. But the solution is finding and being rooted totally in the love of the Father, being securely rooted in that identity that's truly ours of being sons and daughters of God. We don't always believe it. We don't always live out of that identity, but that's who we truly are. And that's what the Lord seeks to heal. And this is what Lent gives us a special time to do. In Lent, we are able to take more intentional time just to discover those places in our lives that the Lord truly does want to heal. It gives us this time to discover, yeah, sure, maybe I'm attached to food or social media. Maybe I use Netflix to numb my pain. Maybe I use booze. Maybe I use whatever it is. Whatever my sins are that I'm using to cope. Okay. But Lent says, let's take it to the roots. And let's discover what's truly wounded within our hearts and allow the Lord to go there. And allow the Lord to heal us in those places, to experience the salvation that Easter brings. This is what our 40 days of Lent give us this time to journey towards. A salvation, a healing that only the risen Lord can provide.